We're speaking with Andrew Whitelaw from Thomas Elder Markets. How are you, Andrew?
I'm very well, very well. A nice, good, cold Ballarat.
Oh, good. Yes, you're in Ballarat today. Saw a post on your social media. You were praising the public toilets of Nhill. Please explain.
We were out in Nhill doing some presentations for a group of farmers, and clearly Nill's had a couple of good seasons because the toilets were the best in Victoria, with very, very high-quality speakers pumping out classical music in the toilets.
Music to your ears, I gather.
Yeah, somebody said they aim to please, which is good, and hopefully people aim.
Yep, well, if you're there long enough, 1812 Overture is a good way to finish. Andrew, let's move on to talking about what's going on in the markets when it comes to grains. What have you been observing around the world?
Look, the market is still, Ukraine and Russia is still the number one thing by a long shot. That is what is keeping the market high. But a few other things creeping in as well. And this is where markets get really interesting, is when people, concentrate on one thing but forget about the other things in the marketplace. And so the last couple of weeks, we've seen some really interesting things. First of all was China. About a fortnight ago, the Chinese agriculture minister came out saying our crop's the worst winter wheat crop in history. It was wet during planting, so we couldn't plant as much, and so yields are also going to be down and not as much area. So that was a really interesting statement from the Chinese government official, because they're usually quite guarded and with their agricultural forecasts.
There's not much propaganda there that I can sense.
No, well, usually it's always a case of the crop's fantastic, and so you usually take it with a pinch of salt. So when they say the crop's good, you think, well, it's not as good as they say. And when they say the crop's bad, you have to think, well, it must be really bad. And so, look, they're a huge importer of grain at the moment, especially the last 2 years. They've massively increased their imports from about an average of about less than 15 million to over 50 million tons just in 2 years. And to put that in perspective, that's 2 Australian wheat crops, or 2 average Australian wheat crops. And so that's a big concern. If they are having a terrible year, then that'll probably keep their imports high. And then we move across to the Americans.
Oh, just hang on. Before you move on from the Chinese, we're hearing that crude oil is sneaking its way from Russia into China, but is the barley going to start creeping in from Australia into China?
Look, at the moment, I think there's a really interesting thing with barley in that China has shot himself in the foot, so to speak, by having an effective ban on Australian barley. And the conflict in Ukraine, to large intents and purposes, there's going to be not that much barley coming out of Russia and Ukraine in the Black Sea for the time being, which really does point towards them limiting the sources that they can buy barley. And so I think one of the interesting things is that barley has been a strong performer since the start of this invasion. But what's also interesting is that the response to French prices has been dramatically higher. Our barley prices are up about 15%, give or take, whereas in France it's more like 40%. And that's largely because they have a ability to get into China. So I think if I was China, and if I was the sort of trade minister of China, I'd be looking and saying, you know what, guys, let's go back to Australia, because we can buy barley from there. We probably have cheaper costs because it's closer, and our maltsters would get cheaper barley. So it's the ideal time to get to the negotiating table and get barley back into China. And they're a big client and a big customer of Australia, normally, and it could increase grower returns.
Yep. All right. I interrupted you about to jump across the Pacific to the US. What's going on there?
Well, this is an interesting one, yeah? Very early in the year, we're just getting out of dormancy. The winter wheat crop is just emerging in the US. And out of the states that have reported their the conditions of their crops, which is only a couple, only the southern states, Texas and the likes of them, so far they're actually, they do basically a rating system. of what percentage of the crop is good, excellent, or poor, fair, that type of thing, yeah?
Yeah, this is the USDA. They're pretty comprehensive with that, aren't they?
That's right, and it makes for an easy to sort of analyse sort of thing. And basically, the percentage of the crop that is good, stroke, excellent, is massively down on this time last year. And when we look at the drought conditions in the US, there's large parts of the US has a moisture deficit. And look, that can be driven by La Nina, which is continuing. And what it really does point towards as well, if things don't improve, and obviously we still got the Ukraine issue, and if the US has a poor crop, then we can expect fireworks. But I do hasten to add, it's only March, long way to go, and as we all know, things can turn around very quickly. You know, a couple of good rainfall events, and it can be, a very good to excellent crop in a month's time. So it's just something that we've got to keep an eye on, is that the US crop is a little bit behind where it should be.
Yeah, I know before we leave the US, they love their biofuel mandates in North America. You've retweeted something with interest about whether there might be some pivoting away from biofuel mandates just so we can actually produce enough food.
Look, I mean, we've all gone past the petrol station, and I remember I said to somebody yesterday, you remember the good old days when diesel was 170 cents a litre? The good old days, a month ago.
Yeah, I'm telling my wife I found a bargain, $2.04 for unleaded.
And you sort of think, well, it's the good old days of fuel, and people around the world are the same. Fuel prices have gone up, so there's been some discussions in the US. I don't know how serious they are on reducing the amount of biofuels that are used in road fuel. But overnight, there was the EU Commission. They basically said that individual member states can look at changing the mandates. The reason being is that we've got major issues looming in that, like, Ukraine produces a big percentage of the world's canola, but also a huge percentage of the world's sunflower seed. Or sun oil.
Is it sort of the national flower or something? I see people sort of showing images of sunflowers or planting them in solidarity or something.
More than 50% of the world's sunflower oil comes out of there. And look, I think what the governments around the world are looking at as well, if we reduce the amount of biofuels in it, because biofuels are getting expensive, like the actual input, say, whether it's rapeseed or soybeans, is getting expensive. So it costs a lot for these fuel manufacturers to actually put biofuels in. So they're looking and saying, well, can we reduce the amount of biofuel inclusion, and therefore reduce the fuel price? So it's a really interesting one, because this is a debate that's been going on for 20 years. Should we really be turning what is a food product, rapeseed, canola, into a fuel? And look, at the end of the day, this is a bad thing for farmers. In reality, our prices have been helped quite a lot by biofuel mandates around the world. Even though we don't do much of it in Australia, we don't have corn that we turn into biofuels like the US does. But we do send a lot of canola to Europe, which gets used for biofuels. And that is a big risk, is if countries stop using biofuels, then it puts a big chunk of demand out of the picture. And we've actually spoke about this in the past. In terms of sort of our articles, we had a bit of a thought piece maybe a month or so ago.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that one, about what the risks are on this side if things shift on mandates.
And if the world changed to electric cars tomorrow, then the grain price would smash.
Mm.
So, look, this is what I think is fascinating about markets, is just the flows and the links and the things you don't think about that would influence a grain price. It's just, people say grain prices are really simple, but those are generally the people who aren't in the grains industry.
Yep.
And it's a fascinating industry because there are so many things, from energy to geopolitics to the rainfall. So it's just fascinating. Love it.
Well, speaking of flows on Flow FM, the flows in the markets for Thomas Elder Markets, Andrew Whitelaw. Anyone wants to follow up more on that fascinating discussion, where can they find out more?
Look, guys, you get all the good information from Flow FM. You just have to listen here. but if you want some more information, look, we've got the thomaseldermarkets.com.au. Bit of a long-winded name, but you can find it easily. Do a bit of Googling and you'll find us eventually.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. We look forward to more public toilet updates soon. Thanks for joining us again on Flow.
No worries. Catch you soon, mate.